rumors and speculation time, and I think you're going to dig these. Disneyland Forward. This is going to get a little more real. New Tomorrowland gets a little more real. How about Tron? Yes. Avatar? Yes, also. I got scoop on all of this and more coming up next, and we're going to start with Disneyland Forward. Now, as of right now, it's nothing more than a website and a dream. Everybody's waiting for the city council to have their vote on Disney's request to change how certain properties that they own are zoned. Change them so that Disney can build something on those properties besides another hotel or another parking lot. Not that they don't want to, given the chance, but Disney would like to build more theme park. But that's where we are right now. City of Anaheim is rumored to be having their vote in the beginning of 2024, late January, early February, or something to that effect. In the meantime, Disney has been conducting grassroots outreach programs across the city of Anaheim in order to gain support from Anaheim residents. I actually went to one of these, and it was at one of these outreach sessions that I asked, is Imagineering really working on Disneyland Forward ideas? I was told no, not really, that they're waiting for that city council vote. I have since been advised that Disney Imagineering has in fact been working on Disneyland Forward stuff, and that they would be ready to start making plans, not necessarily to start building, but to start submitting or releasing concept art and actual proposed ideas once they get a favorable vote. Ready with what, you ask?
Users, prepare to be digitized into the world of Tron.
Awesome. There you go. And when you think about it, it actually makes considerably more sense if you have designs, if you have a wish to build Tron at Disneyland. It makes way more sense to build it in the proposed space for Disneyland Forward than it does in Tomorrowland, which where everybody assumes it would have gone. You can't build Tron in Tomorrowland for a myriad of reasons, but the one that I reference most often is that it simply wouldn't fit. It's too darn big, and you couldn't build Tron in Tomorrowland unless you got rid of something. Some things, plural. But the space set aside for Disneyland Forward is 100% pure. Nothing exists in that space right now except for parking spaces. They can build whatever they want without any sort of limitations. Well, outside of those limitations, like the noise ordinances that we've discussed in previous videos, because of its close proximity to a residential zoned area on the other side of Walnut Avenue. But as it turns out, this is solved quite easily by building the Tron show building parallel with Walnut Avenue, and then the actual track, the outdoor track portion on the Disneyland Drive side of the Simba parking lot. Actually, that's the way you build it with or without the noise ordinance, but it does solve that problem. So that's my first prediction, that we do wind up getting a Tron attraction here at the Disneyland Resort, and then it winds up as part of Disneyland Forward in the Simba parking lot. That also means that the Tron attraction would become part of DCA, not part of Disneyland. That is if we assume that these spaces set aside for Disneyland Forward are going to be extensions of the existing parks and not a third gate, which I 100% believe to be the case. I feel like it makes significantly more financial sense for Disney to grow the existing parks rather than to create a third gate. That's a whole conversation in and of itself, but it makes more sense financially for Disney to make more space for DCA and Disneyland. Other than this, we don't have any more info on what we might expect for the Disneyland Forward space. Now, my first instinct, though, is that I think I would prefer that they take all of the Simba lot and turn that into one land, Tron Land. Not just the attraction there and then something else, but the entire space dedicated to Tron, which may wind up being necessary anyway because, as I mentioned, the Tron attraction is enormous, and I'm not sure how much more else you could fit into that space, at least comfortably, at least something of any kind of significance. I'll ask you. Google Earth says the Simba lot is about 25 acres. We'll call it 18 if we assume that it has to go in one continuous space and where the show building abuts Walnut Avenue. Tron Ride is roughly 6 acres, or about this part of that section of the lot. It's actually roomier than I thought it would be. There's quite a bit more space in the Simba lot than I thought there was. What do you put in that remaining space that is at least somewhat compatible with a Tron ride? If we're going to assume that transitions and theming is still of importance. It's less important as part of DCA, but as Disneyland in general, we do like our things to make sense. Do you make the whole place a Tron land? Build an end of line club, an arcade, something for kids, an outdoor spinner ride or something like that? Is that enough for DCA? Is a Tron ride by itself and maybe one small other ride, is that enough to grow DCA, or do we need to grow DCA even more? Because I feel like DCA does need to grow lots more. Disneyland, you know what? Disneyland's fine. I feel like Disneyland is just the right size. We don't need any more Disneyland. It's fine. If I had my way, I would let them grow DCA into the Disneyland hotel side across the way. Make that DCA as well. The only problem with that is that you got to get through all that interference, the downtown Disney interference and the hotel interference, the Pixar Place Hotel and the Disneyland Hotel. Those get in the way. It's a long way to go of non-theme park space. So, and actually that may kill that whole idea. And it could be why the initial thoughts, the initial projections were, one side was going to be Disneyland and one side was going to be DCA. And that was because there's no way to connect those two. And you wouldn't build another gate there. Guess what's, oh my gosh. Imagine that. If you do put a park on, in Disneyland Forward Space on the other side of Disneyland Drive, over there in the Symbol Lot, you got to send all those guests all the way back to the main entrance if they want to go to Disneyland. I mean, that's a problem no matter what, but it's just that's still a hike. That's a heck of a hike. It makes you wonder if the whole idea of having just one entrance to the park is still feasible. If they do Disneyland Forward, I'll ask you, is that a feasible thing? Can you build Disneyland Forward and still maintain the one entrance philosophy, which I'm a believer of? I like that there's just one way in to Disneyland and one way in. Well, actually, there's two ways into DCA, but Disneyland. I like that. Anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. So if Tron is going to Disneyland Forward and it's not going to Tomorrowland, what is? Now, I've said many times that Tomorrowland is actually not that far off from being a great land. It doesn't need a complete makeover. It's quite serviceable just the way it is. It's got a bunch of attractions. It's got a bunch of restaurants. It's one of the busiest places in the parks every single day. You put a people mover back in there and that's it. You can call it a day. That's where Avatar comes in. Disney is said to be looking to take advantage of IPs that are seriously underrepresented in Disney parks today. And I don't think that there is a single IP that Disney owns, certainly not the one on the size and scale of Avatar. There isn't an IP that is less represented in Disney parks, especially at Disneyland, where there is zero representation of Avatar at Disneyland. I think they're so serious about this that I feel like Avatar might be the future of themed entertainment within the Disney company. This is just the beginning. Well, Pandora at Animal Kingdom is the beginning, but if we set that aside, because it's been years since that's been open, today, now that they own Avatar, this could be the beginning of a whole new era of Avatar development, starting right here in Tomorrowland at Disneyland. Disney is going to be getting into the Avatar business in a big way. Now, I did a video on this when that news first broke about Avatar in Tomorrowland, and I dismissed it at the time. I dismissed it initially, but then sort of changed my tone. I feel like Avatar is about nature and about and the environment and being symbiotic with the environment. That doesn't sound like Tomorrowland to me. But coincidentally, Avatar is also a fantasy world that exists in a planet far away in the future. That sounds a lot like Tomorrowland. They don't have to worry about thematic confusion, which was the issue that I was having. I was thinking only Pandora in Animal Kingdom. How do you put that in Tomorrowland? You don't. But they don't have to worry about thematic confusion if they don't build something Pandora-like. If they build an Avatar experience, which is exactly why I think that they used that term, an Avatar experience that exists right here on Earth. A place where guests can go into a building and see what the world of Pandora is like. A field trip for science class, if you will. You could build sets inside the building, an exhibit that features some of the unique wildlife that you can find on Pandora, build life-size versions of an avatar, talk about the science behind creating an avatar that exists on Pandora. Or how about an exhibit showing the importance of unobtainium and how it's used here on Earth? I would very much like to know what the heck unobtainium is and why it's so important that we had to go all the way to Pandora to get it. It's actually kind of perfect. It's actually the exact kind of thing that Walt Disney would build if you could. I cannot believe that I'm just saying this now out loud, but this is definitely the kind of thing that Walt would build in Tomorrowland in a building like Innoventions. Only hurdle there is what to do with the DVC lounge. I'm just joking. Of course they get rid of it. When I first saw the concept art for the DVC lounge, I'm like, that doesn't look permanent. That does not look like the kind of thing that they're proud of and that they want to stick around for decades. That's the kind of thing that could go away like that if you had something else better to put in its place. And by golly, I do believe an avatar experience in that building is better than a DVC lounge. They'll make it up to the DVC crew somewhere else. But yeah, I don't see any problem with them usurping that entire space. Not to mention, though, the DVC lounge doesn't take up hardly any of that Innovention space. I'm maybe a quarter, a fifth of that building. There's a lot of room for play in the Innoventions building for something like this. You can't build Tron in that space, but you can build an avatar experience in that space, and it would fit. I gotta say, it would fit perfectly in Tomorrowland. As for the rest of Tomorrowland, I think that there's more, but I don't have any other information besides that. Whatever else happens, though, it will not come at the expense of Space Mountain. Space Mountain will stay intact. In fact, any version of a new Tomorrowland has always said, Space Mountain, you can't touch Space Mountain. That'll be there forever. I don't even think that Disney would go as far as replacing Space Mountain with whatever it is that they're doing. They wouldn't even do that. That's how sacred Space Mountain is to the Tomorrowland space, in my opinion. Can't say the same for Star Tours. Star Tours is not safe, nor is Buzz Lightyear. I believe that neither one of those attractions will exist in whatever winds up being new Tomorrowland. Then there's Autopia, and I'm personally happy to report that Autopia does appear to be making the cut into some future version of Tomorrowland. When that does happen, though, it will be electric vehicles. It would be madness to think that they would build something new, a new kind of Tomorrowland, and not make Autopia electric. In spite of the fact, though, that I am 100% certain that people will miss the noise they'll miss the sound of Autopia. And once we all realize how important that sound was, and now that we've got this silent attraction, I think you could actually wind up killing Autopia by making it electric. Check me on that in about 2030. I'll be standing by. Let's have that conversation in 7 years? And I'm not even joking, by the way. The whole allure, in my opinion, the reason why Autopia is still popular to the extent that it is today is the fact that it's the nostalgia of it. The fun of Autopia is based on the fact that it's loud and bumpy and hard to handle and kind of obnoxious. But you put in a fleet of quiet, safe, easy to handle ride vehicles, and I have to question whether or not it'll have the same appeal. It just wouldn't be the same anymore. It would not be the same. They would have to find a way to overcome, and I mean this, they would have to find a way to overcome the silence that would come out of that part of the park. It's in our DNA now, that sound. Anyway, that really only leaves one wild card, one remaining question about a future Tomorrowland. People mover. Can Disneyland build a new Tomorrowland without a people mover? Yes. Yes, they can. Or at least they will. My instinct tells me that they are simply unable to, and for reasons that we've discussed in the past, that the track, the people mover track, is embedded into so much of the Tomorrowland infrastructure. It's embedded into Space Mountain, Star Tours, Buzz Lightyear, Innoventions, the tracks are part of those buildings. And I'm not certain that they could be made whole again, serviceable, usable again under modern building codes without doing irreparable damage to the existing buildings. You can't even take them out. You can't even remove the tracks without doing major damage to those structures. No, it is quite likely that those remnants of a greater tomorrow, if you will remain behind. Relics of a past. Of a past that we all kind of miss and would love to see again. But unfortunately, I don't, I'm kind of okay with it as I discuss this. As badly as I want the People Mover, it is perhaps my favorite attraction of all time. And I can say that having been on the Tomorrowland People Mover and not having hardly any memories at all at Disneyland. But I know, I know that I love the People Mover in the same way that I know that I love my wife and that I love my kids. But I'm at peace. I've said goodbye to that attraction so many times, in my heart that I'm okay. It's gone. It's done. It's not going to happen. The People Mover is just not going to happen. And the sooner we can accept that, I think we all just need to move on. And maybe when they build Tomorrowland, the new Tomorrowland in the future, that'll be enough to get people to move on. And when will that be, by the way? When will that be? Well, the rumor that I'm hearing is possibly as soon as 2028. I know that sounds very aggressive. It sounds very aggressive, but when you consider the fact that they're not building anything new, that they're not even tearing down anything, they're not even destroying, like, let's say, the Innoventions building or the People Mover tracks, and they're not building a Tron ride, they're not building anything new, 4 or 5 years sounds reasonable, actually. That sounds like enough time to get that done. They can build the Avatar experience and then update the rest of the park, update Autopia and all that, or the rest of the land. Update Autopia and whatever it is they're going to do to Star Tours and Buzz Lightyear, they could do that in 5 years, I think. And so if what I'm hearing that 2028 is the projected, that's the goal, that is in sync with the rumors that I've heard about what they are going to do. And it's not in sync, for example, of a complete makeover. You couldn't do a complete makeover in 10 or in 5 years. I was slip. I think it would take 10 years to build a fully redone Tomorrowland. It would take 10 years. And you would have to close significant portions of the land, of Tomorrowland, while you're in that process. Perhaps all of it for a certain amount of time. You would have to shutter Tomorrowland. You'd be out of business for part of that period. And that, I'm afraid to say, that's just not on the table, you guys. That's just not on the table. You cannot close an entire land for 5 or 10 years. You can't. So I feel like, considering that this is perhaps, a good compromise, if true. Sure, we're not getting everything we want. Sure, we're not getting the People Mover or Tron in Tomorrowland, although we're getting it somewhere else. But I feel like those possibilities are just so far out there, and they are not in sync with what is required in Tomorrowland, that this is the best possible, well, maybe not the best. It's a good compromise. We're getting a new experience, a new Avatar thing. We're getting possibly new attractions where Star Tours and Buzz Lightyear are. Hopefully something updated. You're getting electric vehicles, which everybody seems to be so eager for, but in reality, like I said, I think it's the opposite of what you're getting. There's unintended consequences of that decision. Stamp. I'm telling you, check me on 2030. Come. I'll be here. I'll be here in 7 years. I will be 60 years old, and I'll be talking about the old Autopia. Darn, do I miss that noisy gas-powered vehicle. Let us know your thoughts, Fresh Baked, in the comments below. I sure hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's been good to be back at the desk again. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And then follow us on Instagram at _FreshBaked, on Twitter at Fresh Baked Disney, that's fresh with no E, and on TikTok at Fresh Baked Disney. And if you like our show and want to show your support, please do consider joining our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/freshbaked. Otherwise, thanks again for watching, everybody. We love you. Be safe out there. Be kind to one another. And Fresh Baked. Give me some sugar. Oh, you know what? I when I was walking the dog, I
totally forgot.
I did too. I knew it was out there, and I forgot to bring it in. I forgot, like I do.
No, I forgot too. So when you're done with that, you can bring it in.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Now, that also means that the Tron attraction will wind up being part of DCA and not Disneyland. That is if we assume that